Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rachel Krug, and I'm the CEO of Virtual Field. Virtual Field is an exceptional eye exam experience with visual fields, color vision, and pupillometry exams in a portable, patient-friendly headset. We have a speaker today who's going to talk to us about the disc and various ways to communicate with patients, people on your team, and as a leader. And I'm really excited to turn it over to Eric, who's going to introduce himself and walk us through his presentation. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, Rachel, hey, thanks so much. And to everyone tuning in, hi, my name's Erich Mattei. I'm the President and Chief Vision Officer of Akrinos. And at Akrinos, we're in the business of really doing one thing, and that's helping doctors establish solid business foundations for a thriving practice. So we help doctors cold start practices, acquire practices, maximize their potential through the peak earnings years, and look to transition their business to the next generation through independent partnership and practice exits. So I'm really honored to connect with you guys this evening to explore this world of DISC behavioral framework and how we can apply it in our practices to be better leaders and connect with patients and deliver a higher level of care and that heightened level of patient experience. So we're going to do this all centered around a presentation that we call Identify, Adapt, and Communicate to Get Things Done. And what we're going to do here is we're going to explore kind of four sections of our time together. First, we're going to identify exactly what is DISC. Then we're going to jump into how we can identify these behavioral patterns before stepping into section three, where we're going to learn to adapt our communication styles. And then last but certainly not least, have a lot of fun together and apply this DISC framework to different aspects of the clinic and practice leadership experience. So area one, what is DISC? Let's jump right into it. The fact is behavior sciences have indeed been around for a really long time. And it was about 100 years ago in the 1920s that the first behavioral psychologists really started to standardize a lot of this thinking around trying to define exactly what are normal people. And it's out of that they came to develop these four personality types that preceded what is now today we know as DISC. So fast forward all these years later, and now DISC assessments and similar behavioral profiling techniques are used in a host of areas. And now there's so much data backing up a lot of this research that oftentimes you can kind of pinpoint, but with an 80% degree of certainty, exactly what someone's behavioral profile is. So, the fascinating thing around DISC, and it really challenges us to kind of reconsider the way we've probably gone about a lot of our interactions. And let's face it, we all know what the golden rule is, right? Treat others the way we like to be treated. But really to be a more effective leader and just deliver that heightened level of experience within our businesses, it's really a matter of taking a step back and adopting the platinum rule, which is all about treating others the way they want to be treated. So why the platinum rule? Well, obviously, we all kind of see things through our own lens. And again, to be more effective leader in our business and more effective in engaging and connecting with patients in the clinic, the better we can be communication and adapting our communication styles to different behavior types, just the more effective we're going to be able to be in getting things done. So as far as a formal definition of DISC, what is DISC? It's a needs motivated observable behavior profiling system that measures how much energy each of us are putting into dominating problems, influencing others, steadying our environment, and complying to rules and details. And as it were, it's kind of important before we go any further to really set these ground rules and exactly what DISC is and what DISC is not. So once again, it is needs motivated. These are observable behaviors and emotions. And certainly there is a combination of inherent natural behavior and nurtured or learned behavior that we're applying here. Now, what DISC is not, it is not at all a measure of intelligence, skill, education, or experience, or an indicator of anyone's worth, right? So how does it work? Like really what the DISC does is it's going to measure the underlying emotions, needs, and fears, which are the primary concerns that drive our behavior. Now, those of you that are tuned into this live webcast here, sponsored by Virtual Field, each of you have had the opportunity to actually complete your own DISC profile. So now would be a great time if you have that on hand, or if you're watching the rebroadcast of this, go ahead and access that big 40-page DISC profile that really identifies exactly what your core styles are. So let's go ahead and jump into it. It's through this deeper understanding of behavior that we realize there are four core styles. That's going to be revolving around how we handle problems and challenges, how we adapt to others and interact with our contacts, how we seek to steady our environment and adapt to our environment, and last but certainly not least, how we comply with procedures and constraints. So, which style is best? Well, look, not a single one of them. As a matter of fact, each of us has present all four of these styles. It's simply a matter of which manifest themselves in different environments. And the better we can be in identifying that, the better we can show up and adapt for others. And that leads us here to section two, right? So now that we kind of understand what DISC is, and again, those of you that are members of this live broadcast, I invite you to go explore more on the history of DISC and some of that deep dive in your report. But now we're going to jump into how we can identify these behavioral patterns. Twofold, right? First and foremost, in ourselves, such that we can help to maintain self-control in interactions, and certainly identifying in others, such that we can adapt our communication style. So once again, if you're a part of this live broadcast here, you've got an amazing report that really does provide a lot of really deep content into each of the four different behavioral profiles. But if you just have a kind of glance here at some of these kind of personifiers of the different behavior profiles, we certainly see how they do apply themselves to, once again, dominance, how we seek to overcome problems and challenges, the influence piece, how we seek to interact with others, steadiness, the pace and the degree to which we want to comply and adapt with our environment, and then conscientious analysis, taking to the task and really, really putting into play the deep work to get it done. It's also fascinating when you start to identify different behaviors through this DISC lens. We see that while there's a balance between you kind of think of this continuum across, we're more people oriented and more task oriented, and then on our vertical, think of if we're a bit faster paced or a bit slower paced. Once again, it's really fascinating when you take a step back and start to identify in some of your relationships, perhaps with associate doctors in your practice, with members of your staff, maybe key employees of your staff, and certainly with your patients. We can come to find ways, just by way of identifying the pace at which they go about their business. And then if they're more task oriented or more people oriented, can start to identify some of that DISC behavior. Now, this is where I'll once again invite those of you that were a part of this live broadcast and have your DISC profile. You'll notice as you're going through the analysis that everything ties back to these three core pillars that's driving DISC, and indeed what drives our behaviors. And that is our needs, our emotions, and our fears. And if you take a step back and just objectively assess situations and interactions, we'll notice that everything is either needs, emotions, or fears driven. And it's fascinating when you start to look across the different DISC profiles, these different behaviors, the degree to which the emotions can really come to manifest themselves. And you guys are going to see later when we get into kind of the hands-on collaborative aspect of the webinar, if there's, and I'm hoping there's a way that we can maybe drop stuff in the chat, but you'll see how we kind of apply this to different situations you and your staff may find yourself in your office. Now, mind you, this slide here is when we'll do this presentation in front of large groups where not everyone has had an opportunity to complete the DISC, but it's a lot of fun just getting people to kind of self-identify which of the styles best describe them. But this is where, again, I'll invite you to dig into your own analysis. Now, what's fascinating when you do dig into your DISC analysis, you're going to notice that you're kind of measured or assessed in two regards. One is going to be your natural state, and the other is going to be the adaptive. And again, it's really fascinating to see how some of these behaviors can shift back and forth in different environments depending on who that audience is. I know when Rachel and I were doing a run through of the slide deck yesterday, it was fascinating to consider members of her team there at Virtual Field and how members of the sales force and the operations, how they would overlap and identify these different ways to better connect through this DISC lens. So how do we identify DISC in others? All right, so I know there's a lot of really great content. If you dig into your 40-page report, obviously thus far, in this presentation. We've touched on some really great insights. But look, at the end of the day, as with anything, we kind of boil this down to least common denominators. And it's a lot of fun when you just kind of look through this through the lens of identifying others in the animal kingdom. So we can see through that the lion, that which is more the dominant, the king or the queen of the jungle, or the how they're going to really take charge, overcoming challenges, identifying problems, and really being direct. Comparatively, think of the chimpanzee, right? That playful chimpanzee. They're usually social in large groups. You'll see them playing around, having a blast, always caring about each other, very sociable. And then, hey, what do we have? Man and woman's best friend, the dog, right? So think about that dog. Think about if you are a pet owner, think about that dog and how they adapt to you, very calm and steady in the environment, and obviously the epitome of loyalty. And last but certainly not least, the beaver. I don't know how many of you viewers live in parts of the country where beavers will be taken to building their dams and such. But if you ever see them at work, they are laser focused on the task at hand, very analytical, very systematic. So again, identifying these styles in others, we can look through the lens of those around us. Again, perhaps patients, perhaps coworkers, colleagues, employees. Who are those dominant lions out there? Who are those playful chimpanzees? Who are those loyal dogs? And who are those analytical beavers? Because now it's really a matter of having identified that, starting to think of how we can adapt ourselves to those different styles. Now, certainly to bring this kind of more in the context of the real world day to day, right? Where uh, you're not working next to lions and beavers exactly, but rather no. I mean, you would think of those that you're interacting with from a career profile where they are most likely to set. Also, this is a really fascinating opportunity for those of you that have been a part of this live broadcast. Again, thank you to Virtual Field for providing each of you with an opportunity to complete your own disc profile. And I will invite each of you, when you take some time on it, reflect it, and really identify and see how much of that disc profile, both your natural state and your adaptive state, applies to perhaps the way you saw yourself in the mirror. So now that we've identified these different profiles, now it's a matter of adapting those communication styles, right? So again, the first step in building stronger communication is all about awareness. Now we know adaptability, it's truly, I mean, it is the key, it's foundational to all successful relationships. Whether we're talking about the relationships you have with your colleagues, with your team leads across your practice, and certainly those relationships with your patients day to day in clinic. Now, y'all, we are not going to deep dive into all of this. But again, this is where I'll invite those of you that have been a part of the live broadcast. You will find in your 40-page report some really great insights into how to more effectively communicate with the different behavior profiles. So once again, consider that when communicating with dominant profiles, what are those top concerns? Where is there really an opportunity to win them over? Communicating with the influencers, right? So again, what is that influential? If the dominant was that lion, that kind of type A, direct, take control of the problem, take to the challenge head on. Influence is going to be a bit more people oriented. So if you think more in a social context and want to pull others in and leverage the potential of others. Communicating with steady personalities, what are they looking for? Once again, think of who our steady personality types, behavior types are out there. Those are going to be our loyal dogs. And again, loyalty is at the epitome of everything. It's all about consistency and adapting comfortably to the environment. Communicating with conscientious, think back who we're talking here. The most analytical out there, those analytical beavers, they're all about being very systematic, the how and the why. So again, fascinating insights. I'll invite all of you to take some time after this webcast and dig into that 40-page analysis. You'll find some really great insights through and through. So y'all, now we're going to have some fun and we're going to jump into this applied disc exercise and really take some of what we've learned here in this presentation, apply it to how we interact with our patients, with our leaders and colleagues, and certainly with our teams. Now, y'all, this is also a lot of fun to do with groups. So within Akrinos, we actually have a couple of offerings whereby we can actually do this with your team, and everyone on your team can take a disc profile and we can hop in not a 25-minute presentation, but an actual 90-minute live session altogether. Get everyone talking, having a good time, interacting, understanding more about themselves and in others, and becoming more effective communicators. So let's see if there's a way, and I don't know, I'm hoping there's a way we can do it right here in this webcast, that we can have some fun going through some of this disc profiling together. So the first case, the first scenario we're going to apply is disc applied to patients going through pretest. Okay, so imagine this. Take Miss Wilson back for pretest, and she acts rushed and asks, "Oh, and what are all these tests for?" So you take the time to explain. During your testing, she is direct and decisive in her answers. So, what is likely to be that high behavioral style of Miss Wilson? Well, you guessed it. It's going to be the dominant, right? And how do we know this? Once again, she was very direct, very decisive. She asked a what question. She wants to know the facts. Okay. So now it's a matter of, if we understand how this patient is showing up in pretest, how should we adapt to support that style? Look, make it all about the facts. She's asking the what. She's direct and decisive. She's looking for that type of interaction there. So make it all about the facts and the highlights. So next up, we take Mr. Davis back for pretest. And Mr. Davis, taking him back for pretesting, he quietly follows. Oh, and he comfortably asks, "Oh, what does all this equipment do?" So you take the time to explain. And during your testing, his answers are precise and focused. Now, what is likely to be his high behavioral style? Although kind of similar to the first case, notice his were a bit more precise and a bit more focused in his responses, right? A bit more analytical, right? So he's that conscientious behavior profile, behavior type. So how should we best adapt to support his style? Tell him the why and the how, right? Once again, think of Mr. Davis here as like that analytical beaver sitting in your chair. All right, next up, Mr. Martinez. So we take Mr. Martinez back for pretest, and he follows, saying hello to all of the staff members he passes along the way. "Oh, wow, these machines are so cool," he says as he puts his chin in the chin rest unprompted. Or I guess if it's a virtual field, he'd put that on right on the face unprompted. During testing, he's talkative and enthusiastic. So, Mr. Martinez, what is his likely high behavioral style? Well, you guessed it. Clearly, influencer. I mean, we're seeing this. This is that social butterfly that comes fluttering through the office again, saying hello to everyone, very talkative, very enthusiastic. So, how's the best way to adapt to support that style? Avoid getting into too many details. Keep it focused on the big picture, and interact with them, right? They want that one-on-one. They want that people side of things. All right, next up, Miss Taylor. So we take Miss Taylor back for pretest. And she follows and calmly asks, "Wow," or states, "This is so high tech. I bet you love your job," she says as she waits patiently for her direction. During her testing, she is relaxed and patient. So think about these patients that come through the practice and what is likely to be their high behavioral style. Yeah, the steady, right? And now, how should we best adapt to support this style, right? Provide that relaxed, friendly atmosphere, right? So remember that steady profile. They're going to lie between that influential, kind of highly enthusiastic, and the deeply analytical profile, right? That steady is kind of a hybrid of those. So think of how we would adapt to serve and interact with that patient. All right. So next up, we're going to have some fun, and we're going to jump into applying DISC to leaders in the context of weekly staff meetings. Now, y'all, this is an opportunity for you all as doctors, as practice owners, or perhaps as aspiring practice owners, an opportunity for you to take a step back and really consider how you're coming across to your team in your weekly team meetings, right? So, who is this? Good morning, you fine folks. I am so happy to be here this bright and early morning, and I hope you are too. We're going to start this meeting off by checking out the fully booked schedule for the week. What? Then we're going to take a look at how you guys are absolutely crushing this month's goals. Then we'll check in and make sure everybody is feeling good as we head into this spectacular week. Sound like a plan? All right. So I don't know if this is anyone here on the webcast. If it is, if you could wave your hand. Of course, I don't know if I could see you on this end, but nonetheless, look, who is this likely to be this high behavioral style? That's going to be that influencer, right? Now, how best to adapt to communicate with them? Once again, with that influencer, we're going to want to keep it more people oriented. They are all about people and social engagement, if you will. And we can see a lot of that evident in how this leader showed up. So, how do we want to best communicate with them? Give it right back to him, right? We don't want to get too deep into the weeds as it pertains to details. We certainly want to keep it more people oriented and kind of keep things moving forward, right? As we can see here, they're kind of quicker paced. So, let's adapt to that. Next up, who's this going to be? Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend and are ready for a fantastic week here at ABC Eye Care. We're going to take a look at our upcoming schedule for the week, where we are towards goals for the month, and touch on any thoughts or questions you all have as we start the week. Any questions before we start? Now, I would imagine this is perhaps a few of you here on our call. If it is, maybe show your hands and drop a little note in the chat. So, what's likely to be the high behavioral style here? It's going to be steady, right? Again, think of steadying the environment. Notice that there's a balance of, it's definitely high people oriented, but there is a balance of some task oriented type stuff here. It's definitely a whole lot slower pace there. So, how do we want to adapt to best communicate with that style? Well, once again, show up the way they want to be connected with. Think back to our platinum rule: treat others the way they want to be treated. So, how does that steady personality want to be treated? Just that way. Not too fast. Let's keep it people oriented. Let's make everyone a part of the team, pull everyone into it, and make things happen. So, next up, good morning, team. This week, we're going to look at our calendars for the week. And this week, we're going to look at our schedule for the week and our booking percentage, our percentage to goal for each area of focus for the month. And then I can answer any questions you have about those things. What is likely to be the high behavioral style of this doctor? Going to be the conscientious, right? So notice it was very laser focused on the system, precisely what needed to be done. It also wasn't very authoritative. It was a bit slower paced. It was just very, very factual. Again, think of that factual, that analytical beaver there in the practice. So how best to adapt to communicate with them? Well, again, make it all about the facts, answering those questions of the why and the how. Last but certainly not least, who's going to show up this way? Good morning, team. Our meeting today is going to start off by looking at our exam schedule for the week and discussing any holes in the schedule. We'll look at where we are to goal for the month and what we can do to achieve them, and then I'll take any questions. Who's this going to be? And not by process of elimination, if you've been following along, but no, this is that dominant personality, right? Again, think of the lion, very direct, fact-based, big picture, but definitely targeted with things to be done. Notice also that there wasn't really much of a inquiry of questions like, hey, does anybody have any questions before we get started? It was kind of like, right, like, hey, this is what we're jumping into. So how best to adapt to communicate with this behavioral profile? Again, the platinum rule. Let's treat others the way they want to be treated. So they are going to want the facts. They're going to want to know the deadlines. They're going to want to know exactly how we are treating to goal, and they're going to know how we're going to close that gap to make it happen. All right. So thus far, we've touched on DISC applied with patients in pretest. We've touched on DISC applied amongst leaders and how you're showing up with your team. Now we're going to apply DISC to the team in the break room. Okay, so seeing as this is doctors in this webcast, so imagine that you're coming into the break room and you see 4 of your team gathered around the table. Who's doing what? Okay, so first and foremost, who's chatting with everyone at the table? Then who's going over their sales numbers for the month and looking at the remaining patients on the schedule? Then over here, we're going to have someone that's watching and taking notes on a webinar about insurance billing. Fascinating topic. And then lastly, there's someone over here that's politely chatting with the first person while trying not to bother the other 2. Who's who? Yeah. So who's chatting with everyone? That's that influencer, right? That's social, all about people and social connection. Who's going over the sales numbers for the month and looking at the remaining patients on the schedule that's dominant, direct? It's all about, hey, this is the target, this is the problem, the challenge. What do we need to do to make it happen? Who's watching and taking notes in that webinar about insurance billing? You guessed it. It's that analytical beaver, conscientious, very targeted, very precise and analytical. And lastly, who was politely chatting with the first person while trying not to bother the other two? That's going to be that steady. So now is where we jump into a few different ways you can look at this through the lens of also your team clinically, right? And consider how they adapt to different situations, perhaps when mistakes are made. And notice, you're just kind of assessing some of these. Notice how each of the different behaviors amongst your team is going to kind of manifest itself differently when mistakes are made. All right. We got one more here, y'all, and that's going to be disc applied to patients with glasses issues. You know, the independent optical is a great opportunity for any practice to really maximize that patient experience and certainly grow the business, right? So let's look at this case of Miss Smith coming to the office, storming to the front desk, slams down her glasses, says, "You gave me the wrong glasses. I need to talk to Dr. Jones immediately." Who's this going to be? Yeah, it's that dominant individual. Now, how does she best prefer to be communicated with, right? So again, let's think through it. The facts, let them take the lead, but set parameters, right? Agree on the goal, display reasoning, and keep it fact-based, right? All right, next up, Miss Anderson comes into the office, waves at the optician Lindsay, who's helping another patient in the optical, gets to the front desk and says, "I'm sure this is no big thing, but I'm having a little trouble with my new glasses that I got yesterday. Can I chat with Lindsay for a minute to make sure everything's right?" So who's this going to be? And I know everyone's got patients like this, right? That's going to be that influencer. And how does this patient prefer to be communicated with? Once again, they're all about feelings and social connection. So let's support their feelings. Certainly behave optimistically when working with influencing patients and avoid getting into too many complicated details. Now we've got Mr. Miller coming to the office. He smiles at the person in the waiting area, gets to the front desk and says, "Hey, I picked these glasses up a few weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I'm seeing right out of them. Can I chat with someone about them? I'm not in a hurry. I can wait if you need me to." Who's this going to be? That's going to be that steady patient. Man, wouldn't it be great if they were all like that also? "Hey, I've got a problem. I'm not in a hurry. I can wait." That would be a beautiful thing, right? So how does he best prefer to be communicated with, right? Acknowledge that easygoing manner, give him a lot of personal assurances along the way, and walk him through the process. Last but not least, Mr. Davis comes to the office, heads straight to the front desk and says, "Hey, I picked these glasses up and I can't see out of my left eye when I close my right eye and turn my head from side to side. Can someone help me find out if it's the PD or if it's my prescription?" Now, you know, everyone's got these patients, right? And who are these? They're the conscientious patients. And how best can we show up to best communicate with them? Compliment them on the thoroughness and correctness. Let him assess and be involved in the process. And last but not least, avoid conflict. So again, a lot of really fascinating ways to apply DISC, and we can look at this through the lens of considering patients that come to mind in each of those different profiles. Certainly yourselves as leaders looking in the mirror. How do you see yourself and how are you showing up to others? Across your team and your team leaders, and certainly your family and your friends, right? And obviously, you can have a lot of fun now with that 40-page report. Again, thank you to Virtual Field for providing those reports for everyone that was going to be a part of this live webcast, right? But you can really take some time to dig into that and, you know, identify those that perhaps you are looking to advance that that relationship, be more effective in that communication, not only with patients, but certainly as a leader in your business and absolutely in your personal life as well. So in closing, remember, y'all, there's no best style to any of this stuff. It's really all about how you can adapt yourself. And that's what's most important to all successful relationships is that adaptability. So thank you for your time. And if you would like to learn more, if you would like to perhaps deploy this in your practice, reach out to me directly, Erich at Akrinos.com. Rachel, hand it on back to you. And thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this
Yeah, of
webcast provided by, sponsored by Virtual Field.
course. Thank you so much, Eric. That was really informational. Um, if anybody has questions, we can put them in the chat. I actually don't see any, so if not, we can conclude our session and we appreciate the time. Thanks for attending.
Absolutely. Thank you.